Welcome back to Drafting Out Loud. We're today on 4/15/2026. We're going to be looking at the underdog market movers on today's episode. We're going to look at some risers who make it feel like it's deja vu all over again. We're going to be looking at some fallers. And you know what? There's actually some interesting fallers at this point that we are starting to draft. And then we're going to look at the value players and our most questionable value that we were drafting just because he was a great value on Underdog is starting to become slightly less of a value. I don't know how much more I'll be drafting of him if things keep up this way. Let's jump into it. First off, our risers. We got some deja vu coming on right now. We got Dontavian Wicks rising up the boards. We have Matthew Golden also rising up the boards. And if you recall, they were both going much higher than this last year at certain points in the year. Dontavian Wicks last year, pre-draft, before the Packers drafted Matthew Golden, Wicks was going in the 180s. And so I could see him start to rise up these boards even more. You know, you get these 4.15% in a day gains. You got to think there's a lot of momentum going on as far as this goes. In fact, why wouldn't he be going at least where he was going last year in the 180s? And you know what? I'm actually drafting him there too. Uh, I have found myself pulling Jalen Hurts up to the end of round six. So like the beginning of round six, end of round five. So the back half of the board when Hertz usually goes at the front half of the board. And so I find myself pulling Hertz to the back end of the board a little early. And then at pick 180, pick 181, which again is on that back half of the board, I find myself taking Wicks over a lot of the players that are available at that point in time. We're talking players like Christian Kirk or something like that. And so give me the stack with Wicks instead of a player like Christian Kirk. So I could see him go past the 180s, especially if after the draft, the of course, if the Eagles trade AJ Brown and they don't draft someone else high, you got to think Wicks is going to start rising even higher, just like he did was like 3 years ago. He was getting drafted in like the 120s or 130s, if I'm not mistaken. He had a ton of momentum a couple of years ago before he started to get buried on that Packers depth chart. We also have rising up the board here Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden last year had like a crazy rise in fact, looking at some of last year's data, I can see that he was going at one point in time on Underdog at pick. Let's pull it up here again. At pick 77 is what he was going at. Pick 77 is basically in the middle of the seventh round. And he's already risen up to 118. He was in the 120s before. And so he was going in the 11th round. Now he's going in the 10th round. And I could see that continue to rise for him. In fact, you know, I don't know if he gets all the way back to 77, which would be another 4 round rise. That'd be crazy. But I could see him continue to rise as people try to snap up these Packer players before before other people do, basically. This is an interesting time right now, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out. And things could get rather pricey rather quick. We have Golden rising up the board, like I said. We also have Jaden Reed rising up the board too at pick 103. And basically, things are at the point now where Jaden Reed has risen up enough, and Matthew Golden they've both risen up enough where they're now on the left side of the board. If you were to look back just like a week ago, if I'm not mistaken, all the Packers were typically getting to the right-hand side of the board, whether their ADP lined up there or they oftentimes just got drafted on that right-hand side of the board. And that is, things are getting a little wonky here, right? We got two of the Packers on the left-hand side of the board. That means that either these Packers are going to like move up a ton more. For example, Jaden Reed could go from pick 103. He might start getting picked at like pick 86 to get back to the right-hand side of the board. And right now, again, we got Matthew Golden at pick 118. He could rise all the way up to like pick 107 or something like that. And that way all the Packers end up on that right-hand side of the board. Or what might happen is that these Packers don't rise as much, but Jordan Love starts to rise up the board. Because right now he's going on that right-hand side of the board too, like pick one, I don't know, it's like 106 or 111, something like that, somewhere on that right-hand side of the board. I think it's closer to, let's actually look really quick where he is going. If we can do that just for fun. Jordan Love is, yeah, 108. So he's right there on the right-hand side of that board in between those two picks that I was saying. And so he might start to rise up, not because he's the better quarterback than the other players, but just because there's a lot more competition for him. I think that's kind of what's going on with someone like Caleb Williams as well. There's just so many players that are getting drafted before the quarterback that everyone's kind of like, if I don't take him now, then I'm going to miss out on him. And so that same thing might happen with Love. And what stinks there is that now you're not as guaranteed to get your stack. And if you want to guarantee that stack, you're probably paying a higher price and you're probably losing a lot of the value that is on that player if that happens. So now's your time to probably draft these players before they start to get squeezed. Same thing with Hurts. Hurts again is going to be probably rising up the board. I'd guess probably to the he's probably gonna like kind of follow Smith wherever Smith goes to a certain extent. So, but I do expect Hurts to continue to rise up the board based on kind of just that movement there. That's kind of funny, right? AJ Brown leaves, and that might make Hurts rise up the board. But I have a feeling that could happen. You see Goddard also rising up the board here too. Again, with AJ Brown potentially gone, that means Goddard probably will get more targets also. So all of the Eagles, Devonta Smith as well, they're all rising up the board. So take advantage of it while you can. With the fallers, we do have some interesting targets here. I did declare Puka Nakua maybe stuck and not falling anymore, but you can see Nakua is still falling a little bit here, I guess, minus 244 for the day and the week. So he kind of took a pause and he's fallen a little bit more. Who knows what's going on there? If you can get him past pick 4, I think I'm going to do it every time. I don't think I've been lucky enough to have that happen. I missed him by one pick at like pick 8 yesterday. That was a little unfortunate. But we got some fallers here. Bucky Irving, still one of the top fallers on the board. And he's getting to the point where he's getting kind of close to Trevion Henderson. And at that point in time, I think you got to feel like super comfortable taking Irving. And he's pretty darn close to him right now, to the point where Irving, probably is a value here, which is pretty sweet. Definitely get some other combinations and things like that with him. I haven't taken him much, been focusing on Devonta Smith, but as Devonta Smith rise up the boards, maybe Irving's one of those players that I tack on a little more often at that point in time. And then the other player that I find myself drafting here is Juwan Jennings. I've taken him in like 3 out of my last 5 or 6 drafts or something like that. He's continued to fall down the boards where now he's falling around where Diggs is, kind of where Hunter is, before those players, but he's falling down the boards to a point where a lot of the interesting running backs have gotten drafted, and the next pocket of interesting running backs hasn't happened yet. So this is, I think, a time where you want to get one of those wide receivers if you need wide receivers before you miss out on kind of what's going on before or after it type of thing. Last but not least, let's look at our platform values. And I said there was one platform value that is becoming less of a value. And as it becomes less of a value, I'll probably be drafting him less. And that's Parker Washington. I don't know how high I am on Parker Washington. I know there's some people that are super high on him, but he's basically getting closer to the value of DraftKings. And the whole reason I was drafting him for the most part was because he was such a large value on Underdog. As this spread starts to close more and more, I expect myself to probably draft Parker Washington less and less. Hopefully, what this means is Travis Hunter gets cheaper and cheaper, and I'll probably draft more Travis Hunter, which I'm already drafting a good amount of Travis Hunter anyways, hoping for like that one spike week. But Parker Washington, get him while you can before he loses even more of this ADP value. He's not one of the risers, so he's not rising up the boards extremely fast, but he's been rather consistent trickle. I think he might have been on the risers list recently. And so expect this to kind of keep on going up. He's going to get into the 60s, I'd guess. And who knows how close he gets to this 60 pick right here. But there you go. Target Parker Washington if you want the last hurrah on him at a platform value. Bucky Irving's getting attractive. Jennings is in a nice pocket. And take a look at those Packers and Eagles before they get more expensive. Let me know what you think. And if you think I'm on the right page with some of this, I will see you on the next one. Peace.